Welcome everybody to another episode of Bitcoining. I'm your host Fong Chua, and with me again, of course, are the dynamic duo Shin and Chan, and we're here to talk about everything with regards to crypto, Bitcoin, investing, real estate, and all that great stuff. So, welcome, welcome, welcome. How are you guys?
Doing
Excellent.
awesome.
Awesome. Well, just before we started recording, Chan, you mentioned this is the future of real estate. So, what is the future of real estate, and how are we getting there?
Thanks for asking, Fong. Good question. I am so excited because, like I said, I recently got licensed this year, but I've been in real estate investing for over 25 years. Started when I was 21 years old, and everyone would say no to me, like the banks. And I didn't have the capital to put a down payment. I couldn't qualify for a mortgage. And so I was forced to think outside the box. I was forced to find alternatives to financing to get my deals done to acquire properties. And the one goal in mind was, I had full-time jobs. I was working the 9 to 5, and but I thought, hey, if I can get a little ahead with a little bit of cash flow and build that up, that was considered my little nest egg. That hey, if I had that and it paid for my lifestyle each month, so I worked out, maybe around 1 to 2 thousand a month. I had to um, you know, live on, then I don't have to have my full-time job. So that's why I got into real estate. It gave me a little bit of cash flow. So, like I said, I recently got licensed and I'm with Greater Property Group, a brokerage that is all across Canada, but I'm specializing in Alberta. And I'm so excited because we are Bitcoin integrated, meaning that we can transact through our brokerage with our exchange partners in Bitcoin. So if we have sellers that want to sell their home and accept Bitcoin, we can do that. And if we have buyers that are holding onto their Bitcoins and they maybe want to buy, that perfect property that, hey, you know what, they want to live in, or maybe as an investment property for the cash flow, they can do that with their Bitcoin as well. So again, I'm with Greater Property Group, and we can help do that and integrate the Bitcoin transaction. So that's super exciting for the future of real estate.
Awesome. Well, that sounds very, very interesting. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of things coming out as we do these episodes and more information coming from you and whoever out there. I have a few people in mind that are looking to sell their places or carry more Bitcoin. I'll get them right to you. So speaking of Bitcoin, Sheen, what's up with crypto and Bitcoin in the last, what, 2, 3 months, 2, 3 weeks now?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's been 6 months of sideways and slightly down action on the Bitcoin front. It's been um, boring. A lot of people on the market will put it. It's not exciting. But it's actually kind of normal for Bitcoin after the halving. It's normally fairly slow for a while, and it's usually the last quarter. So from, say, end of September, mid-September till December, that all the action in Bitcoin tends to happen, typically in the past. So we're kind of looking to see, will that happen again? I think people are a little bit scared of what's happening in the market. People are talking about the recession coming in both Canada and the US, and they're thinking, is this a time to sell assets and get into cash? So people are a little bit worried, but at the same time, there's a lot of people still excited. There's people, if you look at they call them the on-chain metrics. If you watch what's happening behind the scenes, a lot of the big players are still gobbling up and buying as much Bitcoin as they can. So although it's not being bought off the exchange and pushing the price up, people with money who obviously have the resources to know what's going on are behind the scenes buying. So I think this is, we'll call it bullish, a good time to still hold on to Bitcoin. And like any, investment, not investment advice, if you're looking to get rich quick, this may not be the exact time to get rich quick. But if you're looking to get rich in the long term, I still think it's a great asset. I mean, if all the wealthy people are buying it, then there must be something going on that's good to know, right? And just based on that information, I think we're still going to hold on to a Bitcoin right now.
Everybody's heard of long-term, short-term, fast, slow. What, in your definition, is a long-term hold and a short-term hold?
I'd say if you're planning on holding it at least a year, that would be considered long term. If you're planning to hold it for, months, weeks, days, hours, that's definitely short term. I think the Bitcoin play though is probably more like, 5 to 10 years out that it'll really start taking off. It hasn't gained mainstream adoption yet. It's different than other assets. It's kind of a new technology slash asset that has never been out there before, so no one knows exactly how it's going to behave. But I think, once it starts, the next big step is once banks start accepting it or holding it, like custodying it and able to sell it, it'll become more mainstream. And then it's getting close to that point. There's talks of certain banks applying to be able to hold and sell it. So it could be, depending on what happens after the next election, who gets in, if they're crypto friendly, it could be as soon as that, or it still could be, 3 to 5 years out before it really becomes mainstream. So, I mean, you kind of want to be early on any technology to get the most gains. And I think we're still early, although it's felt like Bitcoin's gone up a lot in the last, 10, 13 years. There still is room to grow for sure.
So in crypto space, we're talking long term will be a year. So real estate space, I know Chan, you've been dealing with real estate for a while now. For a person looking in real estate, when they talk about short term, long term, what's the difference from crypto?
Yeah, it's very similar. And I would agree with Shane, like, long term, we're looking at least a year. So when I would be doing our joint ventures with our joint venture partners, we're saying, hey, minimum of a year, even 5 years out. So if you're looking to get it out, a month or two, that's very short term. That might be a buy, fix, and flip type of scenario. So we like the buy, rent, and holds. And I'm a proponent for the long-term holds. Even so now, even with real estate, you could refinance it, and we call it the buy, rent, refinance, repeat. So the BRRR. So I kind of like that with Bitcoin as well, to do that strategy. And that's what I'm teaching our family, our kids, is, dollar cost average, put the same amount of dollars in every week, or whether it's every month, not even looking at the price of Bitcoin, but just consistently dollar cost average it out and just buy and hold. Because one day, like Sheen said, hey, the banks could look at collateralizing it and we can borrow against it for other investment, perhaps. So we never have to sell it, and we shouldn't sell it. It's one of the rarest assets that are out there that has a ceiling of 25 million that can never be, printed again like our dollars are printed. So it's basing or holding our assets and really basing everything from a Bitcoin perspective. Like, so I think that's what nations and countries and the banks are trying to catch on right now. Like, we have gold, we have precious metals, we have, oil and other commodities, but Bitcoin's become one of those commodities as well, where they want to hold it in their balance sheet. So that's kind of what we're seeing. It's a really interesting play in the last decade that, we've been seeing, because in the beginning we were dabbling like, hey, let's just hold a few. Now it's kind of been pretty cool, pretty interesting stuff, especially in the real estate world.
So for people like yourselves who have assets in crypto, in gold and silver, in real estate, what are the two of you doing to somewhat prepare for what's going to come in November with the election? Are you expecting anything big to change? If something does change, how long would it take for that to be implemented and affect people in Canada? What are your thoughts about that?
Sure, I'll go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that question because it's almost like, when you think about kind of the political and all the things that are happening in the world, it's almost like, are people going to be like preparing for the end of the world or things like that? And the cool thing about Bitcoin is that you just keep buying Bitcoin, saving it, holding it, and you don't have anything to worry about because things can fall apart and Bitcoin will just keep doing its thing. So yeah, I don't really worry about what's on the news. I don't worry about things crashing. And that's a cool thing with Bitcoin. So with real estate, you may be like speculating or, when is a good time to buy, and, it can go up or down. But the opposite happens with Bitcoin. It's kind of a boring play, but it's to me, in my opinion, it's one of the safest plays.
Mhm. And Shin?
Hmm. I'll be a little more specific, I think. Right now, Trump seems to be a lot more crypto friendly than Kamala Harris has been. So I think if you look at the polling and Trump starts to lead, I think Bitcoin starts to go up. And if it flops the other way, then Bitcoin kind of slows down a bit. And I think the reason is Trump has been very crypto friendly. He says he'll never ban it. He says he wants to keep the crypto world growing in the United States. And we've seen other countries start to adopt, let's say, a little bit softer stance on Bitcoin, where they want to promote it or allow it. So, China, Russia, whoever it is, are all going to be competing because they say, well, this is another asset kind of like gold, and it could be used as sort of a standard, and it could be used for international money trade. There's a lot of reasons why they said, well, at least we should. There's a lot of people that are for it, especially in a world where governments are printing insane amounts of money, and this is one thing that they can't keep printing. I think governments are using it politically to entice people to vote for them. So it's become a hot topic like that. It's become political. It's gaining momentum. It's in the news cycle. People are hearing about it more. These are all good things that lead to adoption. On the flip side, could it still be canceled out somehow? I mean, it's pretty hard to cancel Bitcoin at this point, but it's not impossible for governments to ban it. So I think there is still some back and forth as to which person will be elected in November and how will that affect the crypto space. It's definitely still weighing on investors' minds, and at this point, it's anyone's guess as to who's going to win the election and what's going to happen or what the policies are. So it's all just speculation. So plan for the long term, probably okay, but be ready, have a diverse set of assets just in case something bad does happen to the Bitcoin space. It's unlikely, but anything's possible at this point.
So if something bad happens to Bitcoin, then we're obviously worst case scenario is that everybody loses it. So poof, it's gone. If things are good, and as you were talking about how banks are eventually gonna maybe adopt it, make it more public and all that kind of stuff, from the time that is decided to the time it reaches out to the public and it gets more accepted and people are jumping into it, how much of a gap do you think that's going to be?
The conspiracy theory side of me would say if they knew that was coming, all of the big players would be buying it up behind the scenes well in advance, which kind of seems like it's already happening. But we don't know if its reason is because they know that it's coming or because they're just trying to acquire an asset that maybe it's a little bit safer than some of the overvalued stocks at the moment. Or who knows what the real reason is. But if Nancy Pelosi starts buying it, that's probably a good sign. She seems to know what's happening ahead of time for somehow. Yeah, I don't think once it's in the news cycle and people are saying it's happening, all the big players have already bought it all up. They obviously already know something behind the scenes. So if you're waiting for that to happen, you're probably already too late.
So it's not too late. So I know the two of you go and network and build relationships and go to conferences and webinars and all that kind of stuff all the time. And you meet other people who are either already in the space of crypto, already in the space of investing, have that mindset already. Yet you still meet other people who are like, oh, I don't know if I should jump into it, or is it still too risky? Is it too late now? Sounds like it's not too late right now. It's time to do it now. What are some of the, I don't know, some of the stories that you've been hearing or some of the success stories that you've been hearing from others that have gone through that struggle of should I or should I not invest? Chen?
So yeah, good question. I in the last couple of months, I've been going to different networking events and whether in person or over Zoom. And it's interesting because you're having these conversations with other professionals, whether they're mortgage brokers, accountants, other agents, and Bitcoin comes into the discussion. And most of the time, 99% of the time, they didn't even know that they can integrate Bitcoin in their, whether it's in their professional business or transact in it, because there's not a lot of formal education that they can get really good information and be educated in that space. So again, it's still new for everyone. It's a new conversation, but it's interesting. For example, I was just in a BNI that happens every week, but I was invited to one of them as a guest. I've joined a team in Calgary with John William Wade's team in the Greater Property Group. And he's on the commercial side and they do a lot of business brokering. But, you know, they're open-minded and they don't know a lot about Bitcoin. And so he had invited me to a BNI network as a guest that he's a part of. And so in, you know, one of the rooms that we were talking with other professionals, I happened to mention, hey, this is what I do. I also in a brokerage that we transact in Bitcoin. And it was just like mind blowing in a way because number one, they've never heard of you know, real estate being transacted with Bitcoin. And number two, they just had a bunch of questions like, how is that done with regulation? And so it was an interesting conversation, but a good one because they're just like, wow, this is part of lifelong learning. Like we're always learning new things, and you know, and this is something that is so new that you know they want to learn more about. So that was just an interesting conversation, and I'm excited because every day, like I'm learning new stuff from other people too, and so it's gonna be great for the future to integrate Bitcoin into our daily business.
Shin, anything to add to that?
I think Chad hit the nail on the head. People aren't aware of what they can do with Bitcoin yet. A lot of people still think it's a scam. You know, just look at the comment. I don't understand it, so I'm not going to invest in it. And I kind of get that, but I don't think people understand what NVIDIA really does, and they still invest in that. They don't understand AI, and people still will throw money at that. It's not that. I think it's scary for people because there have been a lot of scams. Like I said, it's a new technology. There's lots of ways of losing your money in crypto, and so people fear that more than anything. That's my opinion. So I think if they could invest safely, that's the next step. Like it all leads back to once the bank's custodian it and people feel safe and they can buy it that way. That's why ETFs, you know, pump the price up so much too. It's a way of people buying it where it's safe and they know it's not going to disappear on them or they're not going to forget their seed keys and lose everything. Responsibility is pushed on somebody else, and that's how people like to invest. So the further that goes along, I think the better it'll be. I'd say don't be fearful of new technology. Learn about it, but you know, people are so busy with other things in their life. It's just another thing that they have to read about and learn. Everyone's like, reading, learning. I don't want to do that. So they'll buy later. And this is a Michael Saylor quote that's pretty important, is like people will buy Bitcoin at the price that they deserve, right? If you want to take the effort and learn about it early, you'll reap the rewards of getting in early. If you want to wait till everybody else is buying it because it's easy and safe and you don't have to think about it, then you buy at a higher price later on. So you'll get it at the price you deserve.
Well, a few years ago, when we started talking about crypto and Bitcoin, I think it was both of you that introduced us to ShakePay, and that was something that made it easy and somewhat fun to kind of look into crypto, look into Bitcoin. Now, in like that's been a few years already. Are there something like that now that is like an introduction point for people to go, oh, I can treat it kind of like a game, and at the same time kind of collect some points or credit with regards to crypto and Bitcoin and kind of learn it from that gamification standpoint?
I mean, I think ShakePay is still around, so that's probably still a good one to use. I know there's other apps. I haven't used them. There's trading apps. So that's probably the introduction most people get, is some sort of trading account where you can buy Bitcoin and trade it into other assets. And the gamification is trying to make your digits go higher by trading things back and forth and hoping and praying you don't lose everything. unfortunately, most people do lose everything that way. It's not trading is not an easy game. It's a zero-sum game, meaning that somebody wins because it goes up and somebody loses because they sold and you know, it goes up, and then someone sells and it buys and it goes down. Whatever way, you end up usually losing money if you're trying to beat the market. The market will beat you more likely 95% of the time it'll beat you rather than you beat the market. So those are good. And ShakePay was kind of a cool idea, like you said. For people that don't know, every day if you log into ShakePay and shook your phone, you got a few sats, and it started to scale and it got higher, and people had insane records of. I mean, it's been around for probably since before 2020, so at least 4 years. So people had long, like 1,000-day records of shaking every day. And then something happened. I don't know the whole story, but there's one day where it didn't give rewards and people lost their streaks or something. It was huge outrage. I think ShakePay is still a cool idea, like you said. It gamifies the whole idea of daily logging in and dollar cost averaging and using it. There are a lot of payment methods in Bitcoin that are making it easier to transact, like the Lightning Network, and there's apps that support it, and there's payment apps. So a lot of them are limited based off regulation and what the banks allow, and there still is the whole worry of money laundering in the crypto space, and so all the regulation is kind of figure out making sure that things aren't related to money laundering, or that there's small amounts that it's not really possible to launder huge sums of money. So once they figure that out, I think a lot more apps will start popping out.
Mhm.
But just use the ones that they have for now, and like you said, get into it, learn a little bit. Even if you bought, $100 worth of Bitcoin or something, I think it makes you want to learn about it. That's probably the best way for people to get started.
Mhm. No, I know that Chan, you come up with some creative ideas with regards to teaching your kids on how to make investing fun. And I know from my experience that talking to a 4-year-old sometimes is very, very, let's say, stressful because they don't really pay attention that much. So how do you make something like sometimes as dry as investing sometimes can get interesting for a child of, let's say, 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 years old?
Yeah, you definitely are on your toes about that. Yeah, you just have to be creative and make it fun. How do you make it fun? Well, they are involved in everything, like when it comes to money. So when we go out to eat, giving them the bill, they're gonna figure out, they're doing math. And especially our son, he loves math. And um, a lot like Sheen, Sheen taught me a lot about Bitcoin, and it has to do with a lot of math as well. But besides that, like my daughter, maybe not so strong in math. She's taken this business course over the summer, and they teach you about, like, what's profit, revenue, um, you know, how to pitch to investors. It's really, just making mistakes and selling and trying to get rejections. That's something I think maybe the Western um, society, like they're very, hey, good job, you got 90%, awesome, whereas when we grew up, it's like, hey, what happened to like the other 10%? Like, so we're a little bit hard on our kids, and I think for a good reason, but it's a good balance. But just to your question, really just make it fun. Like, you know, we get them to see the numbers, and sometimes it has to be physical. So they want to see those coins. And with Bitcoin, of course, it's digital. Like you don't see it. It's up there in the cloud in the blockchain, and it's never lost. Like, you may lose access to it, you may lose your keys, but it's in the blockchain forever. So, but really just getting them to see those dollars, and how much they spend and what it costs. And my son, he is so um, very present with how much things cost. Like we will go on vacation and he'll be asking, okay, well, why did we buy this? Because it's costing this much. That's how much I could have, put in Bitcoin, or I could have put in savings. So he's been a little bit frugal when it comes to just spending frivolously. It's kind of funny.
I can
So,
only imagine the two of you every week. Your two kids stand there and you go like, okay, give me your progress report, give me your portfolio report. Do
What are your
you do like
profits?
competition between the two of them as to who's investing better or who's I don't know, fake portfolio is doing better?
well, we don't go that far. We do things that they already have to do, like they're already cleaning, they're already if they're eating good meals. So we just encourage good, healthy production and meals and physical activity. And if they do that, they're just they get rewarded. Like, I mean, they do. We reward them by like congratulating them, but also rewarding them in financial costs,
Mhm.
which is, you know, the Bitcoins. So for example, they write every day, I say, did you write your opinion letter? And their opinion letter is based on an acronym OREO, OREO. It stands for opinion, reasoning, explanation, and then opinion again. So it's just a structure of their writing process. And so they do that every morning. And I said, hey, if you do that, it gets them into the habit of writing and learning and how to write structure. But they get rewarded. So it's just stuff like that. Or if they read a book that's not a comic book, they'll get rewarded in, maybe a Satoshi or something. So just stuff like that.
Why are you putting down comic books? I mean, come on.
Is
To
that
be
even a
honest, that's
real, are those real books? No, I'm just
oh
kidding.
man, that's how I started reading.
Oh, yeah.
Oh no, our kids love comic books for sure. Yeah, they're awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Anything else the two of what you want to share for this update?
Uh, that I was going to say, it's been interesting because we had the kids, they got a bit of a chunk of money, and we had to buy some Bitcoin with it early on, and they haven't been DCA because they don't have cash flow coming in. But we were watching it, and our daughter made a funny point one time. She's like, "Oh, I can't buy anything right now because all my money is in Bitcoin and it's not going up." And she's been watching it for a while. Like, how come it's not going up? You said it was going to go up. I'm like, you just got to be patient. Long term, it's going to be.
You'll thank me
So
later.
yeah. Although yeah, so I think a lot of people are in the same boat, even our kids. But Bitcoin hasn't gone up as much this year as they had hoped.
Mhm.
Well, it's compared to last year, it's gone up, but it's been like staying the same or around the same amount for the last 6 to 12 or 6 to 8 months since about March, I guess, 5 months.
Mhm.
And so it's been boring, and a lot of investors are like, "Well, I'm going to throw my money in something else that goes up faster." One thing about Bitcoin is that it will stay slow and boring, and once people get out, it'll go up very quickly. There's an interesting like stat that had you invested in the last 20 years in the stock market, if you miss the best 10 days or something like that, you lose half of the gains. It's like those 10 days of really fast volatile movement. And I think that's what happens to Bitcoin too. Within a few weeks, it can go up, 20, 50, 100%. And no one sees it coming. It's kind of at the time that everyone's bored and gets out or doesn't watch it. That's when it makes the biggest moves. And then when it's high again, if Bitcoin goes to $100,000 this year, which some people are expecting, I bet you that's the time everyone's talking about it. It's all over the news, and a lot of people are buying it at that point.
Mhm.
They're not buying it now when it's 59,000. They'll buy it when it's in the news cycle. So don't be like the news people. That's why the whole DCA strategy typically works best for a lot of these things. If you just keep buying it, you don't have to think about it. You don't have to try to time it, and you're never going to beat the market. Just get a little bit and ride the wave when it does come.
So
Yeah.
for
Here's
those,
another analogy.
Mhm.
Sorry, back to the real estate. Bitcoin is the digital real estate. So, you can buy land and, put a business on it, put a rental property and try to cash flow and, keep holding that. But it's just as easy to get in right now with Bitcoin in the digital property space. So buy a little bit of that and just hold that property, the digital property.
Shin, you were talking about how there's those 10 days or that short period of time where things are really, really going up. When I'm sure when you hear an inkling of that, you'll let everybody know, right?
I will try. If we have a podcast that day, it's my last podcast, we had it drop like 10% or 20% the next day. So you never know what's coming,
Mhm.
volatility. But I think that's another point too, is like when an asset is really volatile, that's usually when you get the biggest gains. Treat it like a new asset. It's not gold where it, moving 2% a day is a big deal. It's still brand new. It's still pretty small. It's not mainstream, and so expect some wild swings. But for the long term, it seems to be bigger swings up than it does down. So the long term come out ahead.
Mhm. As the two of you were sharing, I was thinking that it could be a neat little exercise, or it could actually be a cruel exercise. Somebody sits there, gets up in the morning, they write down, today I invested X amount of money into crypto, and then you stash that away for 6 months. And then 6 months later, you take a look, ooh, I could have made money. Or, ooh, I lost a lot of money. Or you
Yeah.
stash it away for 10 years, and then 10 years later, go back, grab that sheet of paper. It's like, oh, shoot, I missed out. But anyway, something people can think about. It's always nice to practice that type of mindset and then eventually put in actual money into it so that you get that feel for, okay, what to look for, practice the strategies, practice the mindset, practice the research and all that kind of stuff. Any final comments from the two of you?
Practice the marshmallow test. Exactly.
Well, just to tie things back together, the Bitcoin real estate world, right now we're kind of in this point where real estate appears to be slowing down a little bit. It's not going up as fast as it was. And, houses slowing down. We could enter a period where Bitcoin goes up a lot and houses actually start coming down in price. And it may be to the point where cash flowing real estate actually cash flows again if you buy it properly. So right now it's hard to find a good cash flowing real estate deal in the major cities like Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver, and Toronto. It's like impossible to find a cash flowing deal. But in Calgary, rents are still pretty high. If Bitcoin goes up enough, that could be the point where it kind of makes sense to say, you know what, I'll sell a little bit of Bitcoin and buy some cash flowing real estate. So we're still looking out for that point. At this point, maybe not quite there yet, but that's the whole point of this podcast, right? It was to say, when should you buy Bitcoin? When should you buy real estate? And I think, we're preparing for the moment where it might make sense to switch a little bit back and forth. So we'll look out for that, and then we'll definitely be talking about that when it happens.
Awesome. So we'll see you guys all next time. Thanks for all the comments and all the great nuggets of Bitcoin and real estate updates today. And for everybody, Chan, Shin, my name is Fong, and until next time, when you are Bitcoining, you are shaping tomorrow's economy. We'll see you later.
Awesome.
Thanks, Fong.
Bye.